My name is Clara Whitmore, and I never planned to stand at that gate again. The last time I was here, I was 31, holding my husband's hand as they pulled our son's body from the lake behind the house. That image has followed me through every year since, tucked behind every smile, every holiday, every quiet evening in Oregon. We built a new life and tried to forget the old one. Now, 30 years later, I was back. My husband, Robert, passed away 6 months ago, and my children insisted I come here one last time to sign the sale papers. The offer from a mining company, $22 million, was more money than I could ever imagine needing. My eldest son, Michael, called it a blessing. My daughter, Anna, said it would finally close a painful chapter. And my youngest, Luke, just said, "Maybe now you'll sleep through the night, Mom." They meant well. They always do. But standing there with the Wyoming wind brushing through the tall grass, I realized I was trembling. My fingers touched the old padlock on the gate, rusted, cold, but still familiar. I whispered to no one, "I thought you were gone." The hinges groaned as I pushed the gate open. To my surprise, it didn't resist. The dirt road beyond wasn't swallowed by weeds as I expected. It was clear, smooth, freshly graded. Someone had been here, someone had cared. My car crept down the path that used to be lined with fence posts, most of which I thought had long since fallen. But now they stood upright, mended, newly painted white. There were tire marks in the dust. At one point, I stopped the car and stepped out, listening. All I could hear was the wind, and the faint creak of a windmill turning somewhere ahead. Robert used to love this place. He called it the heartland of his boyhood, though after the accident, he never spoke of it again. He said we'd sell it one day, that it was cursed ground, and I believed him. I never asked about the few weekends he claimed to spend here over the years, maintenance trips, legal meetings, repairs before the sale. I was relieved, if anything, that he could handle it while I stayed away. But now, looking at the ranch, I saw signs of life. The fences weren't broken. The old barn roof gleamed with new tin. Even the mailbox at the end of the drive looked freshly painted. For the first time in decades, a strange thought entered my mind. What if this place wasn't abandoned at all? What if Robert hadn't come here to sell or mourn, but to build something I never knew existed? The farther I drove, the stronger the feeling grew that I was trespassing on someone else's world. I passed a line of fence posts that had been replaced recently, still smelling faintly of cut pine. The gravel road curved, and suddenly I saw smoke rising from a chimney. My breath caught. There, standing at the edge of the main clearing, was the old farmhouse. The same wraparound porch, the same oak tree shading the front yard, but everything else was wrong. The house wasn't falling apart. It was painted white, its windows clean, curtains fluttering behind the glass. There were flower boxes freshly watered, and near the barn, children's laughter carried through the air. I parked the car and stepped out slowly, half convinced I was dreaming. "Hello," I called, my voice sounding small against the wide Wyoming sky. A woman appeared on the porch. She looked to be in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair tied back in a ponytail, her sleeves rolled up and hands dusted with flour. She froze when she saw me, then spoke to someone inside the house. A few moments later, she came down the steps and walked toward me. "Mrs. Whitmore?" she asked, stopping a few feet away. Her tone was cautious but kind. I blinked, startled. "Yes, I'm Clara Whitmore. How do you know my name?" She offered a small, careful smile. "Because we've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" The words made no sense. I think there's been some mistake," I stammered. "This property is supposed to be vacant. It's being sold next week." The woman shook her head gently. "I'm afraid it's not vacant, Mom. It hasn't been for a very long time." I studied her face, the calm in her eyes. "Who are you?" "My name's Maggie Jensen. I manage this place now. Everyone calls me Maggie." "Manage it? For who?" "For your husband, Mrs. Whitmore," she said softly. "For Robert." The air seemed to drain out of my lungs. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My husband died 6 months ago." Maggie nodded. "I know. He came here the month before it happened. He told us when the time was right you'd come." Behind her, movement caught my attention. A man in his 30s stepped out of the barn, a wide smile on his face. He waved enthusiastically and called. Ethan's mom came. The name hit me like lightning. Ethan, my son. No one had spoken that name here in 3 decades. Maggie turned and motioned gently for the man to stay back. "That's Tommy," she explained. He helps with the animals. He's been part of this community since Robert started rebuilding. Rebuilding? My voice trembled. What are you talking about? Maggie's expression softened. You should come inside, Miss Whitmore. There's a lot to show you and a lot you deserve to know. I hesitated at the bottom of the steps, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear her next words. This ranch, she said quietly, hasn't been abandoned a single day since you left. Not one. And as she opened the door to the home I thought I'd buried with my son, I stepped into a world my husband had kept alive in secret for 30 years. The moment I crossed the threshold, my breath caught. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and soap. The same hardwood floors Robert and I had once polished together stretched beneath my feet, but everything else had changed. Where our living room used to be was now a shared office. Desks lined the walls, each covered with folders and schedules. A large whiteboard displayed meal plans, core lists, and medical appointments. I recognized my husband's handwriting in the margins, precise, patient, unmistakable. What is this place? I asked quietly. Maggie smiled softly. Home, for a lot of people who didn't have one. She led me through the house as she spoke. The old kitchen was larger now, outfitted with 2 stoves and an industrial-sized refrigerator. Someone had added sturdy wooden tables down the center, covered with drawings clearly made by children. Stick figures stood beside a blue circle labeled Ethan's Lake. My throat tightened. Robert started small, Maggie explained. It was just him and a few veterans he met in town. He fixed up the barn, offered them shelter, food, and work. Then word spread. People came from other counties, families escaping bad situations, veterans who couldn't adjust after service, mothers with nowhere to go. He turned the ranch into a refuge. I tried to speak, but my voice refused to form words. Maggie continued. He called it the Whitmore Ranch Community, said it was a place where broken things could be mended. We stopped by the staircase. My hand brushed the banister Robert had built by hand all those years ago. It gleamed with new varnish. He did all this. I finally managed. Every inch, Maggie said, and he wrote to you every month about it. She reached into her apron and handed me a small wooden box, its lid carved with my name. He asked me to give you this when you were ready. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were dozens of envelopes, each neatly dated, spanning decades. For 30 years, Maggie whispered, he wrote to you letters he never mailed. He said he was waiting for the right time, for when the pain wouldn't destroy you. I stared at the letters, each one a ghost from a life I thought I'd left behind. Outside, children's laughter floated through the open window. Someone was ringing a bell for dinner. The sound of living, breathing joy filled the house that once held only silence. And in that moment I realized my husband hadn't left behind a secret at all. He had left behind a legacy. That night, I sat alone in what used to be our bedroom, the box of letters beside me. I wasn't sure I had the strength to open even one, but curiosity, no, love pushed me forward. I reached for the envelope on top. The date read June 1994, just 1 year after we left. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Robert's handwriting stared back at me, steady and familiar. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this someday, know that I came back to the ranch. I told you I was attending a medical conference in Denver, but I couldn't stay away. The lake doesn't frighten me anymore. It feels like the only place I can still find Ethan. I spent the day repairing the dock. Tomorrow I'll mend the barn roof. Work seems to be the only thing that helps me breathe again. Tears blurred the ink. I set the letter down and opened another, dated 5 years later. Clara, I met a man named Robert Winters today, a veteran who'd been sleeping in our barn. He has nowhere to go. I told him he could stay as long as he wanted if he helped with the repairs. It felt right. Maybe healing comes from helping someone else survive their pain. Letter after letter painted a picture of a man trying to turn sorrow into something good. He wrote about building new cabins, installing solar panels, hiring a teacher for the children who came with the families. Then I reached one marked August 2002. Inside, the words made my chest tighten. I still haven't told you the truth about that day, Clara. You've carried the guilt for so long, but it was mine to bear. Ethan asked me that morning if he could try fishing alone. I said yes. I promised I'd join him soon, but I got caught fixing the tractor. You were in the kitchen baking his cake, thinking he was with me. When I finally looked toward the lake, it was already too late. I let our boy go alone. I've lived every day since trying to make sure no other child's laughter ends that way. My breath left me in a sob I hadn't felt in decades. The weight I'd carried all my life, every sleepless night, every nightmare replaying that afternoon shifted. Robert hadn't been escaping me all those weekends, he'd been redeeming himself. The next morning I found Maggie in the kitchen, pouring coffee for the residents. I placed the letter on the table between us. "He blamed himself," I whispered. Maggie nodded, her eyes soft. "He told me once that guilt is love that hasn't found its purpose yet." This, she gestured toward the bustling house, was his purpose. Through the window I saw Tommy leading a group of children toward the lake, bright towels slung over their shoulders. "Every Tuesday," Maggie said quietly, "they have swim lessons there. Robert made sure no child would ever drown on this land again." I pressed a hand over my heart, where grief and gratitude collided. For the first time in 30 years, I whispered my son's name aloud. "Ethan," I said softly, "your father finally made peace with the water." 2 days later my children arrived. Michael was first, his tie still knotted from work, phone buzzing with constant notifications. Then came Anna, sharp-eyed and professional in her tailored suit, carrying a stack of legal folders as if she were entering a courtroom. Luke arrived last, unkempt, tired and quiet, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder like a man who'd stopped running but hadn't yet found where to rest. The moment they saw the house alive with people, children playing tag, a man fixing the fence, a woman hanging laundry, their faces tightened with confusion. "What's going on here?" Michael demanded. "Why are there strangers on our property?" Maggie stepped forward to greet them, but I raised a hand. "I'll explain," I said. Over dinner, I told them everything about the letters, the community, the truth about Ethan, and how their father had spent 3 decades turning this land into something good. Michael's jaw clenched. "You're telling me Dad hid this from us? That he used our family land for charity?" "It wasn't charity," I said gently. "It was redemption." Anna flipped through her folders. "Legally, this property still belongs to the Whitmore estate. If the will didn't mention the community, they can't just stay here." Maggie met her gaze calmly. "Your father took care of that. The land was placed in a trust, the Whitmore Foundation for Families in Need. The deed is sealed." The room fell silent. Luke spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. "He built something beautiful here. Why would we tear it down?" "Because it's worth $22 million, Michael snapped. "Do you have any idea what that money could do for us?" Luke's eyes darkened. "Do for us, or for you?" Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Don't start, Luke. You've never worked a real job in your life." "And you've never felt anything that didn't have a price tag?" Luke shot back. "Enough," I said sharply. The word cut through the noise like glass. "Your father didn't build this place for profit. He built it so that something good could come out of our pain. Can't you see that?" Anna leaned back, folding her arms. "Maybe. But Mom, practicality matters. How long can this place even sustain itself?" Maggie smiled faintly. "Longer than you think. Your father funded it through the sale of the northern pasture years ago. It's self-sustaining solar power, agriculture, education programs, therapy for veterans. Every cabin here was built with purpose." Michael stood abruptly. "This is madness. I'm calling the lawyer." Before he could leave, a voice spoke from the corner. It was Tommy. "Mr. Roberts said one day his family would come," he said softly. "He said they might not understand right away, but they would." The room stilled. Michael's phone buzzed again, but he didn't answer. For the first time I saw doubt flicker across his face. I looked around at my children, their anger, confusion, hurt, and realized this was the new battlefield of grief, not between love and hate, but between legacy and self-interest. And I knew this was only the beginning. That night, after everyone had gone quiet, Maggie came to find me. She held something small and black in her hands, a USB drive, its label faded with time. "Robert wanted you and the kids to see this together," she said softly. We gathered in the old living room, the one that now served as a classroom during the day. Michael sat stiffly in an armchair, Anna beside him with a legal pad in her lap. Luke stood near the back, leaning against the wall, arms crossed but eyes soft. Maggie plugged the drive into the television. The screen flickered, and then his face appeared. Robert looked older than I remembered, his hair gray, his skin lined with exhaustion, but his eyes held the same warmth that first drew me to him 35 years ago. "My dear Clara," he began, his voice steady yet fragile, If you're watching this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you the truth myself. I felt my throat tighten. He continued, for years I thought silence was protection. That if I never spoke of Ethan, maybe your heart could heal. But grief doesn't disappear, it just waits for both of us. He paused, glancing down as if searching for words. This ranch, it became my way of speaking to him again. Every beam I raised, every cabin I built, it was a conversation I couldn't have any other way. The camera shifted slightly as he walked outside, the wind rustling through the grass. Behind him I saw the lake, the same one that had haunted our dreams for decades. I used to stand here and think this water took everything from us, he said quietly. But one day a boy named L.A. fell in while helping me move a dock. I jumped in without thinking. When we came out he was laughing. That's when I realized it wasn't the water that took Ethan. It was me, my choice, my failure to watch him. He took a deep breath. So I made a promise to make this lake safe again, to teach every child who comes here how to swim, how to trust the water, how to live. I felt tears spill down my cheeks. Luke wiped his face with his sleeve. Even Anna, composed as ever, blinked hard. Then Robert looked straight into the camera. If my family ever returns here, he said, tell them this land isn't a grave, it's a beginning. If you can find peace, Clara, let it start here. The video ended. The screen went black. For a long time, none of us moved. Finally, Michael whispered, he built all this to say he was sorry. No, I said softly, my voice breaking but certain. He built all this to make sure we could forgive him. Outside, the windmill creaked again, steady and rhythmic, as if answering him from the distance. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows in quiet gold, filling the old farmhouse with warmth. For the first time since my arrival, I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt like the house was breathing again, alive with something deeper than memory. After breakfast, Maggie approached me with a brown envelope. My name was written on the front in Robert's careful script. Inside were 4 sealed letters, one for me, and one for each of our children. I read mine first. Clara, it began, I never meant to carry the burden alone. I just didn't know how to let you see me broken. You were always the strong one. This ranch is my apology, but also my gift to you. You were the storyteller of our family. Now I want you to keep telling the stories of this place, every soul who comes here, every second chance they find. Let this land speak through you. I pressed the paper to my chest and wept quietly. Michael read his next. His voice cracked as he spoke aloud. He says, you always thought success was measured in numbers, son. But someday you'll learn that peace is the real profit. If you can help this ranch grow, do it not for me, but for yourself. Anna's letter was short and deliberate. Use the law, my daughter, not to protect wealth but to protect people. She folded it neatly, her eyes softening in a way I hadn't seen in years. Then Luke unfolded his, smiling through tears. You were my wild heart, the one I could never tame. Stay that way. Teach others that broken doesn't mean useless. We sat together in silence, surrounded by ghosts and sunlight. Later that afternoon, Anna walked with Maggie to discuss the legal side of the trust. Michael wandered the fields, tracing the outlines of barns and cabins with quiet thought. And Luke, barefoot in the grass, helped the children feed the horses, laughing in a way that sounded almost like healing. I stood on the porch, watching them, my heart both aching and whole. Robert had built a place where every broken thing could begin again. And now, each of us was finding our own way to continue his promise. That evening, as the sun began to sink behind the hills, I walked down the familiar path toward the lake. The air was cool and sweet, heavy with the scent of pine and wild sage. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't afraid to go near the water. Children's laughter echoed across the surface. I watched as Luke stood waist-deep in the shallows, guiding a little girl who clung nervously to a float. Maggie sat on the dock, her notebook resting beside her, calling out gentle instructions. The ripples shimmered gold beneath the setting sun. I stopped at the edge of the pier, my reflection flickering beside the memory of another small boy who once stood there, Ethan, with his crooked smile and mismatched socks, waving proudly with his fishing pole. For years, that memory was a knife. Tonight, it was a gift. I knelt down and placed a small photo on the dock. It was worn from years of hiding inside a book. In the picture, Robert held Ethan on his shoulders, both laughing at something just out of frame. I traced their faces with my thumb. We're home now, I whispered. The wind carried my words across the lake, scattering them like prayer. Behind me, I heard footsteps, Anna's, She stood quietly beside me, folding her arms. "You're staying, aren't you?" she asked. I nodded. "For a while. There's still work to do." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll help. I've already drafted new paperwork for the foundation. The ranch is safe now, legally and permanently." A few moments later, Michael joined us, his usual confidence replaced by something softer. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I thought selling would set us free, but maybe keeping it will." I took his hand. It's never too late to learn what freedom really means. We stood together in silence as the last of the sunlight faded, the water turning silver under the rising moon. Down by the dock, the little girl paddled forward on her own. Luke clapped his hands. "You did it," he shouted, his laughter echoing through the night. I closed my eyes. In that sound, the joy, the water, the second chances, I felt Robert and Ethan both. Grief had been the language of my life for so long, but here, surrounded by renewal, it finally translated into peace. When I turned to go, I looked once more at the ranch, at the cabins glowing with warm light, at the people who now called this place home. Robert's voice echoed faintly in my mind. "This land isn't a grave. It's a beginning." And I knew he was right. If you're watching this and you've ever lost someone, don't let the pain be your ending. Turn it into something that matters. Share the story, leave a comment, tell me where you're watching from. Because maybe, like this ranch, your healing starts the moment you decide to come home.